Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Karuna Chronicles. I'm Don, and I thank you for watching. So, what I want to do today is continue on our discussion of impermanence, our mental and emotional bodies, and how we develop through conditions and circumstances the activities of those two bodies and what the possible consequences of those activities are. First, let me jump back to our mental body first. And as previously noted, we create thoughts, and each thought is an individual moment of beginning, activity, and end. And then another thought arises. It may be connected to the first thought in a chain of thoughts that produces a coherent stream of thinking that we have chosen, or it may not be. It may be a different thought altogether that takes us in a different direction. But the essence of all thought is genesis, activity, and dissolution. There's no thought that violates that. And no thought is permanent. Now, again, we can consign thoughts to a memory bank, but that memory bank is like a library. Somebody wrote a book a long time ago, and that book has been collected by a library, and you can take that book out and read it and take it back to the library. Maybe 10 years down the road, you want to read that book again, you go back to the library and read the same book. That's very much how our memory bank works, or our memory center works. We deposit a thought in there because we deem that it's important or it has affected us in a certain way, and we think that we need to hold on or attach ourselves to this thought. And by doing so, we have put a false solidity into an impermanent situation. Thought is impermanent. So as we continue to add to in a stream the original thought in our memory body, that becomes a habitual thought. So for instance, if I were to smack you in the face for no reason and say, well, it's nice talking to you today, and get up and walk out, you certainly have a flood of emotions and thoughts over why I hit you in the face. And I really hit you hard and it hurts. You could have varying thoughts like confusion and bewilderment and so on, and various emotions such as anger and shock and surprise and everything, and the combination of your mental and your emotional bodies working together can produce a habitual situation that in the future, whenever you think of me as that so-and-so. He hit me and I can't forgive him for that, and I'll never want to be his friend again. When in truth, that was an isolated situation where the activity of hitting you happened just as the thought does. It had a genesis. For some reason in my mind, I thought, I want to go hit this person. I do it, and then the activity is over. If I slap you again, that's a completely new activity based on the conditions and circumstances of possibly the first activity. But if I only hit you once, for me it's done. Now, I may have some regrets later on, or I may have some guilt or whatever mental or emotional things I want to cultivate from that, and so on. And I may even consign some of these to my memory body as well, so that when I think of you, I may think, well, you know what, that was a pretty dick thing to do, and I shouldn't have done it, and I regret it. But I don't see you. You know, we have gone our separate ways, and 5 years down the road, I run into you at the beach. And I go, "Hey, Joe, how you doing, man? Haven't seen you in a long time." And you being Joe are thinking, this guy I don't like. I remember what he did to me. He hit me. And he's a bad guy. And, I don't want to have anything to do with him. Well, I may be thinking as I'm saying, "Hey, Joe, gosh, I really regret what I did to him. I hope I get a chance to apologize," and so on. All of these over something that happened that was impermanent. It happened in a moment. But because of our habitual banking these things in our memory and in our emotional centers and in our mental center, we have created an artificial situation that really doesn't exist except for what we created, which came out of the air in many senses. What we created is real because we created it, but it's not real because it didn't happen between you and me. It happened between you and between me and me. So the regrets and the guilt I may have created, I did that all by myself with no help from you and no input from you. If you created anger and resentment and so on, that happened between you with no input from me. Certainly, with a slight example of me lighting a match to start a fire, the activity that spawned all of this was me lighting a match. And a fire ensued. But in order to make that fire go, you have to keep feeding it. And if that fire wanes and you really want to keep it going, then you use gasoline and you pour gasoline on this fire and it becomes a living, breathing thing within inside you. And this is such a common thing over the whole panoply of our mental activities and our human activities and consigned to a memory body. This is extremely human for us to do. But again, it's based on something that was impermanent in its originality or its origin point. And this causes us suffering. The whole 5 years that I didn't see you and you lived with the self-created anger and frustration and resentment and so on that you have towards me, did you harm and caused you suffering. Now, the normal thing for us to do as humans is say, okay, I have this anger and I have this resentment and I have suffered through this because he did it. That's not quite accurate. I did strike you, lighting the match, but you're the one who developed everything that followed. Now, I regret that. That's me within me because I realize I caused you suffering in that moment. And I may even think that there's a possibility that you may take that and cause yourself suffering by habituating the activity as something that you just can't forget and you can't let go of. You're very attached to this anger about me, and you're very attached to the regret that you have of knowing me, and so on. And I really can't do anything about that because these are choices that you make in your own life to take an impermanent situation and make it pseudo-permanent. Now, when we encounter each other on the beach, maybe there's an opening where I can say to you how much I regret doing it and that I was completely wrong and I really valued you as a friend and I love you as a human being, and if I know there's no way to make up what I did to you, but I promise you that I'm going to do my best to treat you as not only just a friend, but as a brother, and try never to cause you hurt or injury again. And maybe you'll take that and sit with it for a little while and think, well, that was genuine. And maybe I don't need to hold on to what transpired in the past, and little by little you can let it go. And through repeated contact between the two of us, you can see that through my activity that I really am genuine about not wanting to hurt you and not wanting to cause suffering, so that when all of our future interactions are based on kindness and love and generosity and wisdom, etc., so that that isolated incident that we both caused ourselves suffering, self-generated suffering, over one incident where I caused the initial point of contact suffering, can dissolve itself, and we can move on in a direction that's more positive and more loving and more beneficial to both of us. Now that's the optimum of what could transpire. I'm probably going to tell you right now that doesn't happen all that often. Very often we take these incidents and we form them into a fairly solid knot within us. And even if we do come in contact later on down the road, there's still going to be some residual in this where you're always going to look at me thinking, I got my eye on you, buddy. I know what you can do, and I know what you did. And while we're having this peaceful and kind interaction, there's still something left. What we want to do is develop ways where we can clear all of that out. And we put it there. We put it there. We created it. We gave it life, which it didn't deserve and which doesn't exist, and in a permanent way. And we've attached ourselves to it where it's like a tumor growing within us. It has to come out, and either it's surgically removed or it goes away by itself. Well, we hope that we don't have to have surgery, and we can find a way to expiate this tumor in a way of our choosing, and in a way that produces a better human being and a more peaceful human being, and in a way that we gain the wisdom of, oh my gosh, look what I did to me in this equation. It's not what he did to me, it's what I did to me. There is the beginning of wisdom in our lives. There is the beginning of the recognition that regardless of what the external circumstances are to us, regardless of what the external conditions and circumstances that cause us suffering, it's how we interpret that suffering and how we hold on to it and how we magnify it or leverage it in our lives to never let go of it. And we do this repeatedly with many other things. I remember years ago watching television, some of it was live even, but most of it was on tape of tsunamis out in the Pacific, where, I remember seeing a beach in Thailand where people are laying on the beach and walking up and down, and there's little restaurants at the seaside and everybody's having a good time, and then all of a sudden the water sucked out and it started coming back in, and within a few minutes there was no beach left, there was no cafes, and this water turned into rivers running up the streets of these towns and villages and so on, taking the buildings and the cars with them and causing enormous suffering. Well, nobody really did that. It just happened, okay? It just happened. I can't explain to you. I have my own thoughts about it, but I can't really explain to you with certainty why these things happen. It just did. But as a person who lived through that, I could certainly carry fear of the ocean or the regret and the loss of a family member who may have died or friends who may have died, my business or my job that may have gone away, the destruction of the environment around me, and I can join in a communal mourning and a communal emotional experience. But in that communal experience is my own individual experience. I may blame God for sending a tsunami. I may think that I'm the unluckiest person in the world because I'm the only one that survived out of my family. Or I may think I'm the luckiest person. We have choices in all of this, and those choices form habitual connections to our mental, emotional, and memory bodies. And they become parts of our life. So that whenever we think of tsunami, we're back in the roiling water and back in the emotion that we felt at the time. Now, maybe on a reduced level, but it's not, because it's still there in a pseudo-solid form. And that's maybe a bit of an extreme example, but we do this in ways, as I've just described, over and over again in our lives, so that we're filled with tumors. Some of them are benign. Hopefully most of them are benign. They live in our bodies without causing us anything any further disruption, but some of them are malignant, and they cause great deals of suffering. And in some cases, we may not be able to deal with these on our own, and we seek the advice of a mental health professional or a clergyman or a guru or somebody, a friend, to help us get through all of this. But really, if we're the ones that create it, then the answer to our dilemma is the creator of the situation, not somebody else. Now, it's wonderful if someone can help us. But essentially, if we created it, we have to sort of uncreate it, or not really uncreate it, but replace it with wisdom and compassion for ourselves, that we did create this, it does cause us suffering, and the wisdom to understand that we don't have to do it, that we can make other choices. And also with the compassion that other people do this too, so that if we encounter a jerk like me that slaps you, we can look at that immediately in a way that, okay, I know this guy, and he's really not a bad guy. I wonder what kind of suffering he is going on, or is going on in his life at this moment for him to strike me, instead of moving right into the emotion of, he's a jerk, and I'm going to hate him for the rest of my life. So again, choices based on the mental, emotional, and spiritual conditions you create in your own being. And it's important. We will continue to develop this. We will look at it further. But trust me on this. Choice is extraordinarily important, how we make choices. And in the next segment and the ones after that, we'll continue to look at choice, because we're going to spend a little bit of time on this. Thank you for watching. I hope that this helps introduce something new into your life, and that you have time to give it a little bit of thought and look to see if what I've spoken to you about has any relevance to your own experience. If it does, then what I really hope is that you can see that while your experience is different from mine, and all of our experiences are different, there's a commonality here. And the commonality is this, is that suffering is caused by the thoughts we create and hold on to, the emotions we create and hold on to, and the choices that we make that support those two. And in that, we're all exactly the same. Again, different circumstances and conditions, but that's the process we all go through. And if we can take this process and use it, inputting a pair of guidelines to make these choices that allow us to make the choice immediately, oh, I know this guy, he's not a bad person. I don't know why he struck me, but I must have compassion for the suffering that prompted him to do this. Let's see, is there a way I can help him through this? That would be a novel approach. That would be very much Jesus turning the other cheek, or suggesting that that's what we do. And that's where we want to get to in our lives. Okay? So I guess the way to end this particular segment is peace out, brothers. If you like this video, hit the like button, and if you want to find out what's coming, hit the subscribe button. We want this to be an open forum, so we welcome your comments and questions, and we'll endeavor to answer them as quickly as we can. Again, thank you very much.